When people bring up Prometheus to me, there's two things I think of. One, a very underrated Ridley Scott movie that gets thrown under the bus all the time. I will defend that movie. I like Prometheus.
Hey, take it easy, man, all right?
And two, the Batman villain. The villain who basically brought the Justice League down to its knees in the early 2000s. Maybe I should reword that because we just found out there was a lot of Mad Hatter Rule 34 of DC online. So when I say brought to its knees, I mean he almost beat them.
Yeah, you're out of control today, man.
But this character was referenced a lot in the Arkham games.
Yes.
This character was referenced multiple times, and it really seemed like they were building to this character showing up. We're going to take a look at that today because there is actual proof that Prometheus was originally going to show up in Arkham Knight in some form or another, and ended up getting cut during development, which is just a shame. So, before we hop into it further, T is here today.
A pleasure.
And it's, you know, probably your second video back. I don't know what order I'm releasing these in. But
The
it's
return.
Nice to see you.
Yeah, it's great to be
Nice
here.
to see you. We faked your death. It was a Dark Knight Rises situation. I couldn't afford the plane ticket to, where was it, France?
Sure, yeah.
Nod at you in a crowd, so...
And instead of the pit, you kind of just dug a hole and just kinda,
stayed in it.
And that was it, yeah.
That makes
Yeah,
sense.
it didn't even cover me. I just kind of sat there for a long time. So, yeah.
You do what you have to do.
Low budget, yeah.
But we are taking a look today at Prometheus and Arkham Knight. So if you enjoyed today's video, please be sure to leave a like and subscribe for more content. There's a whole playlist of rejected media on this channel I encourage you to check out. This is one of my favorite topics to cover because I always like to think about what could have been.
Yeah.
It's nice to do it in someone else's life and not your own. It's less depressing.
It really
Let's
is.
hop right into it. So I think it's worth mentioning before we even look at this that Prometheus was mentioned several times in this series, both in Arkham Asylum and in Batman Arkham City.
Yes. Yeah, we see in Arkham Asylum really early on in the game, actually, you stop that laughing gas, you drop Razor through a nice little building there. You go in and you see his poster hanging up on the wall in the asylum there. So you scan it, it's a Riddler trophy, talks about the character, some really cool concept art of the character too, by the way.
Yes.
There. And his costume looks awesome there.
And we know that he was wanted at the time. I mean, he was not apprehended at the time because he had a wanted poster on the wall. Plus, someone was just a big fan of it and they just loved keeping his wanted poster around.
Very possible.
This was a character who was active. He was doing his life of crime at the time, and Batman had definitely encountered him at this point.
I think that we had seen, maybe it was on the Arkham Wiki, that it kind of, you can assume that he had been obviously involved in crime already. Batman had had an encounter with him, had apprehended him, that he was being treated, people assume, by Dr. Young in Arkham Asylum, and that he had escaped before the Joker riot and everything that happened in the game and the sequence of Arkham Asylum. So,
Or he was let out for good behavior.
could have been.
I mean, he
real
seems like a
wholesome
nice guy.
Yeah.
But then you get to Arkham City and you get to the GCPD building, worth mentioning the old GCPD building.
Yes.
Because by this point, GCPD had moved. But they had abandoned a lot of their stuff and just left it in the old building, which is where Mr. Freeze eventually sets up shop. When you go in here, actually right near the entrance, you can find a newspaper which is on the wall showing an article which is about Prometheus's parents. It's worth noting that Prometheus is so iconic and special from the comics because he's what we call an anti-Batman character. It's essentially an archetype of character that Batman has gone up against. I believe another one that would count is Wrath from the New 52. They don't really do much, I don't believe, with that character anymore. But essentially these are characters that have a lot of the same resources, mental capabilities, and genius of Batman, except they're on the other side of the law.
Right.
That's what Prometheus was. And he was actually a really interesting reflection of Bruce Wayne because he was on the other side of it, where he saw his parents get gunned down by the police. His parents were criminals. And this newspaper references that, and that dark origin is why he essentially becomes who he is. I mean, he kills law enforcement officers because he blames them for the death of his parents.
Right.
So he's basically just the other side of the coin of Batman in a lot of ways.
In every way, pretty much, yeah.
And so this character was being built up even there, and there's actually another reference to him right there in Arkham City as well.
Yeah, there's a medical dossier that you can see there too, which that also kind of ties into the character as well. And actually, what did that end up going into in his character bio? Where did that add, I guess, the medical dossier? Does it talk about some more of his details.
so it does. It's what sucks is it's really hard to read on console.
Yes.
Because it's one of those things where with console, I think it was like the absolute worst with Arkham Origins, where there was lots of stuff on the wall, you couldn't read it at all.
Yes.
It does add a couple little details to them, but a lot of it's just kind of like filler information.
Like you see his name, and it talks about that a little bit. So there's
And a lot of it's just cursive.
yes.
So it's basically just a thing to show, hey, he's here. He was examined at Arkham medically and mentally, and he exists. That's essentially what it was there to do.
But it doesn't necessarily indicate that he's in Arkham City. If he is, we don't know where he is.
No, just the police had record of him.
Yes, which could still be, that's from the asylum still. So that could be what that leads to. But essentially, another Easter egg of that Prometheus is around. It's almost like they're building this character more and more. They're building the hype. He wasn't here.
Yeah.
Kind of thought that maybe he'd make it into City. Doesn't. Okay, but we're still thinking about him. Is basically what that feels like Rocksteady's doing. Like we have a plan for this guy almost.
Then you get to Arkham Knight, and I would argue the entire story is based around another anti-Batman-like character, which is Arkham Knight, which we find out then is basically their take on the Red Hood, which they then turn him into the Red Hood, of course, by the end. But it's worth noting that villain slot was taken.
Right.
So he didn't show up. But Arkham Knight was the last official Arkham game from Rocksteady, at least until now when they're doing Suicide Squad. And so people were like, well, where is he? Well, when the game was actually data mined, there was actually some information from Season of Infamy in the file, in the code, which referenced him.
Yes. Yeah, there is a DLC test Prometheus code in there that you can see. So obviously, there was that, and it's lined up with all the other characters that were in the DLC too. So there's Mad Hatter, Mr. Freeze, Ra's al Ghul, Killer Croc. Those guys are shown in there, in addition to Black Mask, who's another cut, by the way, which maybe is another video that we can talk about too. But with Prometheus, he's shown that he was going to be in the game. I think what's tricky about and why I could justify them not adding him in and maybe seeing why it doesn't make sense, just in my initial thinking, I guess. There wasn't any build-up, there wasn't really any new story, or I'm sorry, any continuing story that was going with Prometheus moving into this DLC, where this DLC kind of felt like it was wrapping up the stories that have been going on for multiple games now between Mad Hatter, Mr. Freeze, Killer Croc, Ra's al Ghul. Obviously kind of just tied the bow on a few of those loose ends. If you just introduce a new character in that DLC, it doesn't really fit. Like Black Mask is a little bit different, where he's had some, there was at least something that we got with Black Mask, albeit kind of in a fake way in Origins, kind of got trolled in that way. But
and
it was
then getting completely destroyed in Arkham Knight's Red Hood DLC.
Right.
And which it's still up to debate, was it the real one or not?
Right. Arkham City, you just see him getting the crap beat out of him by the Target guards. So that's one thing too. So really, Black Mask didn't get much love in this series either. But
no.
Prometheus, nothing. So if you just insert a new character, the question then becomes, do you have enough DLC time to make that a meaningful story, to do the character justice? Probably not, right? When you've got these other big characters that have a lot of story that build up to it, it almost feels like hey, we're just trying to throw this out there so we give you something. So maybe it's better that we just don't do it at all, I guess, is where I could see where that makes sense.
And then on the other side of the coin, I do also think that it's frustrating to keep referencing something and be like, oh, wait, he's out there.
Right.
And then he never shows up.
Ever, yeah.
And I think that's the frustrating reality of it is, do you choose to introduce the character and probably not do enough with him? That's what happened with Hush. He was introduced kind of as a side plot in Arkham City, and then in the end, I thought he was done very well in Arkham City, actually, with the build-up. And then in Arkham Knight, they very clearly did not have enough room or time for him. They didn't really know how to wrap his storyline up. So what did they do? They just wrapped it up, and it just didn't amount to anything.
Instead, they added other characters like Professor Pig, who, mind you, I thought it was a really interesting, creepy side mission.
Loved that.
It was great, but some of that energy maybe should have gone towards Hush, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, after all that build-up.
Yeah.
Well, and that's a point you mentioned before we even recorded this. We were talking about it and how we would have done it. I think that if you were going to put Prometheus in here, you would have either had to replace Arkham Knight with him, not have him be the Arkham Knight, but I mean just get rid of the Arkham Knight concept entirely. And he is the anti-Batman working with Scarecrow, so that way you could still fulfill Scarecrow's, build up from the previous games. Or you would have needed to have referenced him a lot more in previous games. Maybe even had him show up as a mission where you defeat him in Arkham City or something like that, or Origins even. But instead, we don't get that, because even with Firefly coming back in this game, at least he was a character that somewhat mattered in Origins. So when he shows up in this game and you dispatch him by chasing him down with the Batmobile, yeah, it's not the most fun and engaging thing ever, but it's still interesting and wrapping up a storyline from Arkham Origins. There was really no storyline to wrap up here. There was just references.
Right.
You'd have to rework a lot to make it fulfilling, but it was also very unfulfilling to keep referencing him and do nothing. So I don't know what the solution would have been here.
The solution would have been to have him show up in an earlier game, for sure.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it's all on Arkham Knight to try to make him fit, and you either have to make him, like you mentioned, a significant character in the story, where he matters, you maybe have a boss fight, there's some storytelling going on there, or not at all.
And that game's already suffering a little bit from the Amazing Spider-Man 2 syndrome, where it's got a lot to juggle.
Yes.
That's why they couldn't wrap up all those storylines without Season of Infamy. How are they going to do that when they're introducing the Batmobile, trying to tie up the Joker mental subplot, trying to tie the Bat family into the game a little more, because it's their last shot to do it before they're done for now. You know, trying to wrap up all these other storylines, Two-Face, Azrael, Penguin, you know,
adding
so
Arkham
much.
Knight, you know,
Yeah, like, and then you're going to put Prometheus in here.
Right. If it would have fit in even somewhere like Origins, where you've got a young Batman and maybe something where he's coming up, Prometheus is just starting to arrive too, and they're just the antithesis of one another, and you've got, instead of the electrocution or meme fight, maybe you've got something where, you know, like, that was a fun thing. I'm not saying you should get rid of that,
I agree. I mean,
but you know what I mean,
Deathstroke.
though.
Deathstroke was a Titans villain, and I'm not saying he wasn't done well, but
arguably the best boss fight in the Arkham series. It was awesome.
Very good. He's up there with Mr. Freeze.
Yeah.
I think he's just he's the combat equivalent of like peak boss fight, whereas Mr. Freeze is like the stealth, the Predator peak boss fight. You know, they rewrote Deathstroke to essentially be an anti-Batman-ish character in Origins. So would you then have two of them, or would you get rid of him and put in Prometheus? You know, there's just not a lot of room in these games.
Maybe drop Lady Shiva and put him in instead. You know, things like that.
You could have,
you know, like small characters like this. But the thing is that would have fell on WB Montreal to do that when that was a Rocksteady thing. That they're the ones who were creating these Easter eggs and kind of building the hype a little bit for this character.
Yes.
So you're putting that on a different studio to kind of put your vision out there when. Kind of an ask, you know.
And
so
unfortunately, we got no vision from it, though.
Nothing. Yeah, nothing at all. So it would have been nice if maybe he could have even been one of the assassins that was going on. I think it would have made a lot of sense in that gameplay, too, with Origins. I think that's where he probably fits the most. If he doesn't get in there, though, and obviously if he's not in Asylum City, really tough to get him in there without him being a main character.
Yeah, it's frustrating. I think that this is one of the biggest, though, missed opportunities for me in the entire franchise.
I
was
agree.
to see this character who, again, he mattered so much. I mean, I cannot stress how interesting this character was in early 2000s. Like, we're going late 90s leading into the early 2000s, Justice League of America comics. Like, this was a character who was up there, who was a threat, like a big deal villain. And so then when, you know, you're getting the Arkham games and he's being referenced in, I believe it was, 2009 for Asylum?
Yep, 2009, yeah.
So, you know, that kind of lines up with where people would be thinking, oh, hey, you know, like anyone who came in from the comics, they would have been thinking, I know that guy. That's awesome. All those people, I'm not saying they're the majority, but all those people that were looking forward to that did know who this was, other than just reading a character bio, ended up getting nothing at all.
Right.
I think that's what's so frustrating to me, is that there are so many great done characters in this franchise. I also think it's why Joker gets a lot of hate from parts of the fandom. Amazing character, but I think a lot of people look at it as, well, why did all these other characters not get enough development, screen time, or ever show up? They mattered. I think Prometheus is like the face of missed opportunity for villains in the franchise.
Right. It feels like there was still more meat on the bone, I guess you could say, with a few of these guys. Where obviously the Joker story, that was the center of this entire franchise.
And we love it.
It's amazing. It was incredibly well done. Troy Baker, Mark Hamill voicing them as well. Awesome. But you're looking at, like you've mentioned, that there are some very, very noticeable missed opportunities with a few of these guys. Even some of the lesser named ones that are mentioned, maybe just as like a, hey, we're just letting you know these guys exist in this universe. We don't have any plans for them, though. Like Ratcatcher, Killer Moth, characters like this that you get Easter eggs of, but it's like, you're not going to see them.
And then they wrote in comics of very questionable canonicity where some of those people were killed, or some of them had some other storyline, and then it just created debates around, is this canon or not? And I just think there were certain characters like Prometheus that were handled very poorly.
Yeah.
And it's too bad, because the team behind these games is incredibly talented. They were amazing, you know, and I just think that there's so much mythos and so many characters, you can only do so much. And there's always going to be the ability to look back and be like, well, what about the Court of Owls? It's like, yeah, well, of course. But they also did a lot with what
Gotham
they did.
Knights wasn't enough for you.
No,
huh?
oh, man. Can of worms. Maybe I should leak another image from a guidebook. Anyway, let us know what you think in the comments down below. T, do you have anything else to say with this?
No, just happy to be back. Happy to be talking to Arkham.
Yeah, we'll never hear you again.
Good, all right.
But maybe, you know, maybe you'll be in some other videos like Spider-Man and some stuff like that we'll tackle over the coming months. So
fantastic.
You know, well, it's nice to have you back. T was cut content from the channel. We decided to drop a DLC and restore it.
That's true. This will be paid content.
Yeah, it will be. It's all members. You have to pay for it. Let us know what you think in the comments down below. If you enjoyed today's video, please be sure to leave a like, subscribe for more content. There is more Rejected media on this channel, entire playlist. I'm clicking stuff to self-promote here really quick. I've got videos on Rejected Star Wars games. I've got What If episodes that were rejected by Disney for Marvel. It's stuff with No Way Home. There's a lot of different fun things in this playlist I hope you'll check out, as well as a Lost Assassin's Creed game. And I do have a new channel, JRPG, where we make content on RPG games and RPG adjacent games, things like Fallout, Elder Scrolls, Fable, Final Fantasy, Kingdom Hearts, lots of stuff over there, Soulsborne. So if you're interested in that, it's in the description down below. We have a store there, lots of awesome, great stuff to help support the channel. Memberships, Patreon, a Let's Play channel. Guys, there's a billion things here, okay? Like, something's gotta stick. There's gotta be something you care about. Please!
Come on, man, hey!
Like, something!
Hey, no, reel it in, man, hey!
No, hey,
dude, relax, hey!
Oh, sorry,
come on!
Back to reality, there goes gravity. We'll see you all in the next one. Have a fantastic day. Stay Shui.